Good morning, and welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Friess, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, it's my pleasure to be here. And I wish now, as you might expect, to continue our reading and discussion of the book, The Papacy and the Civil Power by R.W. Thompson. We were on page 607 yesterday, but for continuity purposes, I'll begin a paragraph ahead, so there will be confidence that nothing was missed. By the way, we were talking about the Jesuit tactics of mental reservation or mental restrictions. In other words, tactful mental gymnastics through which a Jesuit can justify the telling of a lie. And we gave some examples of that yesterday, and one in particular of how under Jesuit influence and with the purpose of evading the oath of President of the United States, a Jesuit-controlled papist or a Jesuit-controlled president could literally stand in front of the cameras of the world and proclaim that he will give his word and swear that he will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and then say under his breath or within himself a mental reservation such as, when hell freezes over, and then say, so help me God. And literally I describe these nonsensical mental gymnastics through which Jesuits go to tell lies as the equivalent of a little boy telling a lie with his fingers crossed behind his back, as though that exonerates him from the lie. Now, for continuity, we'll begin in the first full paragraph on the bottom of page 606. It says that these rules are part of the Jesuit system of mental reservations is undoubted. Okay, first of all, I want my listeners to realize R.W. Thompson is telling us that the Jesuits have a system for lying. It's an entire area of study in Jesuit education, how they may lie and justify within themselves telling the lie. And it's quite a body of education. It takes effort to learn all of the tricks of the Jesuit trade in lying. And many people will recall my discussions about certain people in our government who are quote-unquote Jesuit trained. In other words, people in our government who have been to Jesuit colleges and universities. And all of these people are trained in this art of lying by the Jesuit order. It's part of the curriculum. So when we elect Roman Catholics or Jesuit trained, whether they be Catholic or Protestant or Evangeli-Belly or any other denomination, if they've gone through this Jesuit training, they learn how to equivocate and to use double-sensed words and how to escape the normal sense of what they say. So they're all skillfully trained in this art, trained out of the Jesuit system of mental reservations. Now, Sanchez, returning to the text now, it says, Sanchez, one of the fathers, says, quote, a man may swear that he never did such a thing, though he actually did it, meaning within himself that he did not do so on a certain day, or before he was born, or understanding any other such, and I will add the word childish, circumstances, while the words which he employs have no such sense as would discover his meaning. In other words, the words that he says sound truthful, but it's the mental reservation that he has within himself, that he speaks to himself. Well, I didn't do it on a certain day, or I didn't do it before I was born, or understanding any other such thing within himself. To exclude him, to exonerate himself from the lie he just told. Look, our words are to parallel with our meaning. And because lying has become such an art, as taught by the Roman Catholic Church, and by Hollywood, and by preachers and pastors, it's taught on the street. It's demonstrated in every form of communication. It's demonstrated by our politicians. And people begin to treat the truth with cynicism. It's to the point where, as I said yesterday on the program, if a man's mouth is moving, he's lying. If a man's lips are moving, he's lying. Rare is the man who speaks the truth. Everything is taken with a grain of salt. And now the truth is so tortured that no one can trust another man. And it has had a real and lasting effect on our society. And I alluded to the scriptural passage yesterday on the program that says, because sin shall abound, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And that's exactly what's happening in our society. There's very little love between men these days because there's no trust. And it's because the Roman Catholic Church and Christianity, generally speaking, having followed these examples, have made an art of lying. If you can't trust the person to whom you're speaking, what manner of love can you have for him? Now it says the reason given by him and Felicius, another father of the Roman Catholic Church, is that, quote, it is the intention that determines the quality of the action, unquote. And they give a surer method of avoiding falsehood, quote, after saying aloud, I swear that I have not done that, to add then in a low voice, today, or after saying aloud, I swear, to interpose in a whisper that I say, and then continue aloud that I have done that. This is hard to read. I'm sure this is coming off as rather difficult to the listeners. Just reading this out of the book, I wish all my listeners had a copy of this book and were reading these words for themselves and examine it until you finally comprehend what R.W. Thompson is trying to say. But the art of lying is so artistic and creative and organized and almost to a science. They teach the art of lying. And it says the same rule is also expressed in these words, quote, no more is required of them to avoid lying than simply to say that they have not done what they have done, provided they have in general the intention of giving to their language the sense which an able man would give it, unquote. I mean, you can lie, but you can't outright lie, basically. I mean, you can't sound like you're lying. If you think the church is going to make excuses for you and absolve you from telling an obvious lie, you bring discredit upon the church. But if you can lie using one of these artful tactics, one of these artful gymnastics of mental reservation, then the Roman Catholic Church can absolve you of these lies. If you follow the rule of Jesuit casuistry and sophistry, then you bring no dishonor to the church. Just learn how to do it, and that's what they do in these Jesuit schools. Now it continues, and Escobar, another and greater of the Jesuit fathers, lays down the following lax and demoralizing rule in reference to promises not confirmed by an oath. Quote, promises are not binding when the person in making them had no intention to bind himself. Let me read that again. Make sure you really comprehend what this author's trying to tell us. This Jesuit priest says, promises are not binding when the person in making the promise had no intention to bind himself to comply with the promise. In other words, you can promise anything you want as long as you reserve within yourself no intention of performing the promise. Isn't that incredible? He says, now with the believer in the ultramontane doctrines, in other words, that if you hold the ultramontane doctrines, that the Pope is God on earth. He rules everything and everybody, king and people. Now, if you are a believer in the ultramontane doctrines which prevail at Rome, and which, since the decree of papal infallibility, have become the only doctrines which the Pope will allow to be accepted as true, it is quite certain that the oath of allegiance will not stand for a single moment in the way of his obedience to any command of the Pope for the promotion of the welfare and interest of the Church. In other words, no oath sworn by a Roman Catholic can be binding if the Pope says otherwise. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say that the President of the United States elect comes before the cameras of the world, puts his hand on the Bible, raises his right hand, and says, I solemnly swear to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, so help me God. Well, he made reference to God, didn't he? Well, the representative of God on earth is the Pope. So he gets to the White House, sits down in the Oval Office, the phone rings. It's Pope Benedict XVI. Yes, I heard you just mention my name. By the way, you're absolved from that oath. You are in the White House because you have agreed ahead of time to enforce Roman Catholic canon law in the country, and you can be pretend to be the defender of the Constitution of the United States so long as it convinces your people, only on the condition that you impose Roman Catholic canon law. And if you don't, we'll JFK you. Have a good day, Mr. President. That's the way the system works. Okay? If the Pope is God on earth, he rules your mind, and he rules your body, and he rules your spirit. He rules your thoughts. That's the way it was in history, and that's the way it is today. Now, in taking the oath, how easy was it for him to have renounced his allegiance to some civil monarch, yet at the same time to have reserved in his mind his allegiance to the Pope, not as a civil monarch in the same sense, but as the spiritual head of the Church, whose power, divinely granted, included authority over all temporal affairs within its jurisdiction. But if he did not have this reservation, the other modes of escape are equally effective. Possibly there are not very many who have made this reservation, but these will labor assiduously to increase their number. The Jesuits and those upon whose minds they have impressed their teachings understand it perfectly well, and their struggles to obtain the mastery over the world are unremitting. See, they use this line in order to get unfair advantage over the nations. so that through these lies they might bring the nations under the control of the papacy. It says they have the unabated ardor of an army held together in spirit and inspirited by the promise and expectation of victory. They expect to conquer the world through these means. And it says, it is fair to assume that a majority of those Roman Catholics who have taken the oath of allegiance had no such mental reservation. We're talking about immigrants again, coming to the country and swearing off all allegiance to all foreign potentates and swearing their allegiance to the United States alone. Many Roman Catholics come and they're very happy with that. Okay? No mental reservations when they swear that oath. But these well-meaning and good citizens are relied on to acquiesce by their silence in what may be done by such as had. What may be done by those who had a mental reservation when they swore that oath. A fellow Catholic could come side by side, sit down, swear the oath with full intentions of not observing the oath. And the one who came and swore the oath of allegiance to the United States with no mental reservation, with a full intent of obeying the laws of this country and swearing off all relations with other potentates, all allegiances with other potentates, are expected to just sit and acquiesce when the others set about to tear down the country and the Constitution. And these seem to have no conception of the extent to which this passive submission may carry them. They may well pause at this point for reflection and self-examination while they are protected by institutions which allow this to them. That is, Protestant institutions. You're allowed to examine yourself. You're allowed to reflect. Whereas in the Roman Catholic Church, under Roman Catholic canon law, you're not to think, you're just to obey. Okay? When they come to this country, they have freedom of conscience to examine themselves. Now it says, if they do so, they may readily see how completely they have become entangled in the meshes of the Jesuit net and realize the nature of the efforts their hierarchy are now making to bring them under the government of the canon laws of Rome, whensoever the existing laws of the United States shall conflict with them. Perhaps not 1 in 1,000 is aware of these efforts. But who is aware of these efforts? The hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. They know, the bishops and the archbishops and the cardinals of the Roman Catholic hierarchy in this country know what the intent of the Roman Catholic Church under the oversight of the infallible Vicar of Christ on earth. They know that their objective is to eventually, one way or another, gradually, if at all possible, so as not to cause harm or open conflict, but to do it in such a way that eventually it can be done and the Constitution and the Protestant institutions of this country be replaced with that form of government that the papacy most enjoys, and that is a monarchical form of government. Make no mistake, as unlikely and as unbelievable as it seems, the Roman Catholic hierarchy in this country are well aware of what their job is to do in this country. Now, the proceedings of the Second Plenary Council of Baltimore. The Second Plenary Council of Baltimore. And before I even continue, just remember that Baltimore was the first archdiocese in this country. This archdiocese of Baltimore was under the original oversight of Jesuit priest John Carroll. This is the Baltimore Diocese, or the Bishopric of Baltimore, was the very reason why Pope Benedict XVI came to this country in 2008. That was to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the establishment of the first archdiocese in this country. So now we're talking about one of the plenary councils of this diocese. It says the proceedings of the Second Plenary Council of Baltimore were referred to in the second chapter to show the preference of the American hierarchy for the Catholic over the Protestant system of government and their opposition to certain laws in the United States. So they literally called a council, a plenary council in Baltimore, Maryland, to discuss what the Roman Catholic's purpose was to do in this Protestant form of government. Okay? This is not a blind accusation. This is history. And it says, from what was there said, it would appear very satisfactorily that their purpose was to bring about that condition of things which shall result in governing this country by the canon law of Rome. Some of the principles of which, as they affect the obligation of allegiance, have been explained. Now, did you get that? They called the council, and the purpose was to bring about the implementation and enforcement of Roman Catholic canon law in this country. And I'll remind my listeners once again, Roman Catholic canon law are founded upon the false decretals, the pseudo-Isidorian decretals, the widely accepted frauds and forgeries of ancient popes form the basis of Roman Catholic canon law. And Roman Catholic canon law, for all intents and purposes, just simply establishes the papacy's spiritual and temporal power in the world and gives him plenary immunity from all accusation of impropriety, and strips the civil power and any other court, whether it be civil or ecclesiastical, any jurisdiction over the popes. There's no law in the world under which you can bind a pope. And it was openly and plainly discussed at this Baltimore Council that the purpose of the Roman Catholic Church was to impose Roman Catholic canon law here in the United States. Now, this just proves from history what I asserted before, that the Roman Catholic hierarchy in this country know perfectly well what they are supposed to do. Now, if there was left any doubt upon that subject, it may be easily removed. Since that chapter was written, a work has appeared entitled, quote, Notes on the Second Plenary Council of Baltimore, unquote. The preface thus begins, quote, the desire of gradually introducing in this country, as far as practicable, the ecclesiastical discipline prevalent throughout almost the entire church was strongly and repeatedly expressed by the fathers of the late National Council of Baltimore. Its decrees tend both avowedly and implicitly to promote the accomplishment of this object, unquote. They're on record. We will impose Roman Catholic canon law in replacement of the Constitution of this country. We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio.
Years ahead of the dominant media, FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on Internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the Internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Papacy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Papacy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Papacy Reality News app. Get it now.
Welcome back to Inquisition Update. And by the way, before I even continue, I want you to know that Inquisition Update is brought to you by First Amendment Radio. So if you love Inquisition Update and would like to see it stay on the air, please support First Amendment Radio, who sponsors the program. And if you wish to email me, please do so at tom@seawaves.us. That's tom@seawaves.us. And I answer all my email that require an answer. And I thank you for your submissions and the time you take to write. And I enjoy reading the email of my listeners. Also, please check out the daily installments on inquisitionupdate.org, where I'm using a blog-type format now. And if you are kind of miss the old web page, it's still there. Just click on the link to the old website and avail yourselves of the resources available there. And again, I thank my listeners for their support and for their prayers, particularly the prayers. You can't talk about things like this without drawing a lot of fire. I draw a lot of fire. And they shoot real bullets. And I ask the Lord's blessing and continued protection and provision. And I thank my listeners for praying for me. Now, we're talking about this plenary council held in Baltimore, Maryland, where it was openly discussed that the duty of the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, the duty of every Roman Catholic, is to help impose Roman Catholic canon law in replacement of our Constitution. It's not a blind assertion. It's not a false accusation. It is the open talk of this council. And it says the author of the book, who gives us the notes on this second plenary council of Baltimore, the author professes to propound the decrees of Baltimore because they are designed to establish, quote, the same hierarchy and in consequence substantially the same relations between bishops, priests, and laity as exist elsewhere in the same church. In other words, in other countries, in Roman Catholic countries. Now, it's important to understand that early in the founding of this country, as I explained, I believe either yesterday or the day before, during the colonial period, the Roman Catholic Church was an extreme minority. They composed about 1% of the population of the colonies. They were in a very, very vulnerable position. And it didn't take a scientist to realize that if they upset the Protestants, the vast majority Protestants in the colonies, they would have been wiped out. And there would have been no hope for a Roman Catholic Church to exist in this country. So in order to secure their existence, their safe existence in this country, the Archbishop of Baltimore, the Jesuit priest John Carroll, wrote a letter to the Papacy and said, please understand our situation here. If you interject yourself and appoint bishops over the church and establish the Roman Catholic hierarchy in this country for us, the majority Protestants will see your interference and might react by killing all of us Catholics. Because the Protestants in this country are in no mood to take any direction from any foreign potentate, whether it be the Queen or King of England or the Pope of Rome. They intend to establish their own government and to govern themselves. And if you interject yourself in the affairs of the Roman Catholic Church in the United States, we're toast. So if you want this nation to remain a hope for the Roman Catholic Church, you have to butt out. You have to leave us alone. Let us appoint our own bishops. Let us govern ourselves as best we can, taking into consideration the sensibilities of the overwhelming majority of these colonies, Protestants. We have to go against canon law for a time. We have to promote religious liberty where there was never before any religious liberty under papal dictation in Europe. We have to make these temporary concessions. And if you'll just quietly go along with us, we'll succeed. And we'll grow, and we'll practice, and we'll prosper. And as always, just like we did in Europe, we will conquer this nation. And we will replace the Constitution of this country with Roman Catholic canon law. But you have to butt out. The United States is not going to tolerate any interference from a foreign potentate. Now, this is what all this took place in Baltimore. Baltimore is the oldest archdiocese in the country. It's the senior archdiocese, and when this council was held in Baltimore, everybody had to regard it as a senior council. And they openly swore that the same hierarchical structure, the bishops, the priests, and the laity that exist in the United States will take on the same form as it exists in Roman Catholic countries the world over. And what form is that? They control the government. They rule the government, and they simply cause the civil power to enforce Roman Catholic canon law. So that was the direction and the purpose of this Baltimore Council from the very beginning. Now it says, in defining the canon law of the Roman Catholic Church, Roman Catholic canon law, he calls the Church a perfect and sovereign society, which possesses, quote, a threefold power: legislative, judicial, and coercive or executive. Kind of sounds like our government, right? Legislative, judicial, and executive. So it goes in the government of the Roman Catholic Church. And it says, and which cannot be subordinate to any other society. In other words, they have to rule. It's in their destiny to rule, to not be subordinate to any other society, including the society of the United States of America. The Roman Catholic Church must rule. That's a tenet of Roman Catholic canon law. It holds the quality of infallibility and divine right. Now it says there are but two perfect societies, the church and the state. The church is absolutely supreme. That is, the Roman Catholic Church is absolutely supreme, and the state but relatively supreme. That the state, when emancipated from the church, in other words, when the state is separated from the church, it stands in open revolt against God himself. There should therefore be such close union between the church and the state that they should assist each other, unquote. Now, this is the old world order. That's how it was in Europe during the papal heydays. Clearly, they intend to do the same thing right here in the United States of America. R.W. Thompson right here is plainly telling us that the New World Order is simply the old world order restored in what used to be known as Protestant America. Now, he calls the canon law the common law of the church, which, quote, is obligatory on all the faithful spread throughout the world, unquote, and makes it comprise, in so far as it is written, the constitutions and decretal epistles of the sovereign pontiffs and the decrees of ecumenical councils. He then defines the principles of the common law, among which are those which follow. Now listen to these. These are the canons of the Roman Catholic Church. Now this is not a complete list, but this will be enough to tell you what Roman Catholic canon law really is. The Pope can dispense with any law. Let that sink in a little bit. The Pope can dispense with any law. No law written by men on the earth can stand above the authority of the Pope. The Pope can change any law arbitrarily as he sees fit. All he has to do is speak the words. Okay? The Pope can not only dispense with the civil law, do away with all civil law if he pleases, but he can even do away with the laws of the church, as we talked about in a previous chapter. The Pope arrogates to himself the status of God as the lawgiver. And what the Pope gives, he can also take away. Now, again, I want to point out that this is in direct contradiction to the God of the Bible. God honors his law above his own name. God never changes that which comes forth from his mouth. He abides by his own law. Christ fulfilled the law perfectly, every jot and every tittle. Otherwise, he could not have been the spotless lamb necessary for the sacrifice, to redeem man from his sin, to pay the sin debt. In direct contradistinction between Christ and the Pope is the ability, the self-proclaimed power of the Pope to dispense with any law, even God's law. Now that is Antichrist. And it says, the Constitution and decrees of the popes are explanations of the divine law, and are therefore binding as soon as known. The Church does not recognize the right in any government to say whether or not the pontifical decrees should be enforced. She is supreme and independent, and therefore can admit of no intermeddling with her authority. The Isidorian decretals, although now known to be spurious and false, were looked upon as genuine for the first 700 years and until their fraudulent character was discovered by Protestants in the 16th century. Yet they aided materially. These false and forged decretals aided materially in building up the papal system, and there's no pretense that the popes have abandoned such provisions of them as increased their power. The Pope alone is the interpreter of the divine law, and his temporal power is necessary to the free exercise of his spiritual authority. That's right, the Pope says his spiritual authority is supreme in the world. He is first and foremost the priest of the world and the teacher of all spiritual truth. Now, nothing can withhold him from that office or limit or restrict in any way his spiritual jurisdiction. And that simply requires that the temporal power of the governments of the world must give him that latitude. That simply means that the temporal power of the governments of the world simply have to adopt Roman Catholic canon law. Okay? He derives his jurisdiction immediately from God and imparts a share of the plenitude of his power to his bishops. Ecclesiastical property must be governed by the laws of the church. Let me explain this one to you a little bit. All church property, all Roman Catholic Church property is an asylum. Every church, every piece of property owned by the Roman Catholic Church is governed by Roman Catholic canon law. No civil power can walk onto that property and impose a law that is not canon law. You know, the police department of this town can't walk into the Roman Catholic Church and start ordering a priest around. That's overstepping the power of the civil government, the rightful power as described by the Pope. The Pope is sovereign. That church belongs to the Pope, and the Pope is a foreign potentate. His church is an embassy, and the laws of the church are the only laws enforced in a Roman Catholic Church or on any Roman Catholic property. Okay, so just think of every piece of Roman Catholic property in your community is a foreign ambassador, a foreign embassy. It's a little hard to comprehend if you've never been told these things before. Now, it goes further. It says the state ought to recognize and carry into effect the laws of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, that's always been the law, the canon law. That's what established the papal hierarchical system of old Europe, the old world order, that the state imposed the laws of the church on the people. Now, by these laws, laymen have no right of property in the church, and it is against the law of God that they should dispose of its revenues. In other words, everything in the church belongs to the Pope. The laymen can come in, worship, bow, genuflect, cross themselves, and pray to the Jesus cookie, and they can even eat a Jesus cookie so long as the priest gives it to them. But all of that belongs to the Pope. You can't take anything out of the Roman Catholic Church. You're a thief then. The Pope can have you strung up or burned at the stake. Not even the priest can use the assets of the church for his own purposes. All right. Now, where the mother of a child is a Catholic, this is going to blow your mind. We've talked about it before on the program. It says where the mother of a child is a Catholic and the father is a heretic, a Protestant, the child may be baptized at the request of the mother and against the wishes and the consent of the father. In the Roman Catholic Church system of government, the woman is the power of the family. She controls what church the family goes to. She determines what church the children are baptized in and what law they come under. The father has no say. Okay? This especially in the case of a Catholic woman who marries and has children with a Protestant or some other heretic. Now, it says children of heretics may be baptized against the will of both their parents. Say two Protestants, a man and a woman, both Protestant, regarded as heretic by the Roman Catholic Church. If they have children, then the Roman Catholic Church may use the state to confiscate the children, to kidnap the children, and to baptize them into the Roman Catholic Church against the will of both of their parents. How do you like that one? We saw that actually happen down at Tony Alamo Christian Ministries. Those kids were born in the ministry, served God in the ministry, and they were independent. And the state of Arkansas, state and federal agencies rolled in there and took up all the kids and put them in the secular schools, put them in the Romanized churches, and literally took them away from their parents because they regarded them as heretics. In the Roman Catholic world, you don't have even control of your own offspring. They belong to the church. It says, children of heretics may be baptized against the will of both of their parents because all heretics are, per se, subjects to the laws of the church. That's Roman Catholic canon law. They don't care if you're a Catholic or not. You're subject to the laws of the Roman Catholic Church. Religious books, including Bibles, shall not be printed without the consent of the priesthood, and all such as have not their approbation are forbidden to be read. Now, I want my listeners to take out their Bibles when you get a chance. Not now. I'd rather you just listen. Take out your Bibles and find out if they're copyrighted or not. It'll be listed in the front of the book. And look for an icon in the front of the book, a kind of a stylized 666 in a circle. These are identifiable marks of the Roman Catholic jurisdiction over that Bible. That is a Bible that has been approved by the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church to be printed. You won't find any of that in a true, genuine, authorized King James Version of the Bible. It is not sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church. It is cursed by the Roman Catholic Church. It's not supported by the Roman Catholic Church. It's condemned by the Church. And it doesn't have a copyright. And it doesn't have any Jesuit iconography or insignia inside the cover of that book. People ask me all the time, well, Tom, how do you know that the authorized King James Version of the Bible is the infallible Word of God? It's simply because it doesn't have the sanction of the Roman Catholic Church. That's it. It's a perfect translation of the Scriptures. Rome hates the Scriptures more than anything else in the world. And it has a canon law that says that books, including Bibles, should not be printed without the consent of the priesthood, and all such have not their approbation are forbidden to be read. Another one, the coercive power of the church includes the power, quote, to punish the insubordinate and repress the lawless, unquote, which extends to any punishment short of shedding blood, such as imprisonment in monasteries and other chastisements. Now, don't think for a minute that Rome hasn't reserved to herself the power to shed blood, because the Inquisitions make this perfectly clear. But the point I want to make to my listeners is that all law enforcement has its roots in Roman Catholic canon law. The power that they have to punish evil is believed to be derived from the Roman Catholic Church. You see how the Roman Catholic Church has usurped the power of God? It was God Almighty in His book that says that the legitimate power of the state is to reward good and to punish evil. That's established by God, not the Pope. And what is good to be rewarded and what is bad to be punished is obedience to or violation of God's law, which is completely different than Roman Catholic canon law. So the papacy has just simply usurped God's rightful throne, even in its control of the civil authority. Now, these provisions fall very short of the whole body of the canon law, which is set forth in the papal and consular decrees, many of which have been noticed, but they distinctly show the purpose of the hierarchy to be the introduction of the whole, that is, the entirety of Roman Catholic canon law into this country gradually, but as rapidly as they can, either by the exercise of direct power or because of the inattention and toleration of the American people. Now, if you're paying attention, the alarm bells should be going off. I finally get it. Their purpose is to, as expeditiously and as safely as possible, by direct power or indirect, through the inattention and toleration of the American people, to impose Roman Catholic canon law. I just described the current situation in this country from top to bottom. Inattention and toleration. While the Constitution of the United States is being gutted and Roman Catholic canon law put in its place, and the only thing that's stopping God's people from comprehending this is the lack of the knowledge of the history that we are reading in this book on this program today. When you comprehend what R.W. Thompson is saying, you can only look at the United States of America and say he was right, he was right, he was absolutely right. The Pope rules this country today, and it was because of the inattention and toleration of Protestants. Thanks for listening. We'll continue tomorrow on Inquisition.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.